Moose are not the best pets to keep because they are big in size and also quite aggressive sometimes. But when you least expect it, the most ferocious animals tend to crave some love and affection. Erica's Plucas did not expect much when he saved an abandoned baby moose. He did not expect to experience such a change in his life when he saved the moose. Little did Plucas know that his life was going to be changed forever. Erica's Plucas was not someone that lived an extravagant life, nor was he someone that lived over the top. He was someone who was just living a simple life on a farm. Plucas lives in the Lithuanian countryside and enjoys the simple things in life like us city folk. His farm was situated near a forest, so as you may have guessed, there were a lot of nature and wild animals present in his life. Plucas was not looking for the superficial things in life. He was not about the materialistic things that this world has to offer. He always felt that nature gave him peace and had always felt pastoral about spending his life far away from the chaotic lifestyle that the city offers. He was just going about his simple life when one day, an unexpected thing happened to him. It was like any other day with nothing much to mention when Plucas reached home. But all this changed when he met with a surprise at the front gate of his house. Plucas saw that there was a baby moose that was lying there so helplessly with no one to turn to. He rubbed his eyes to see if he was hallucinating or not, but got closer to realize that he was not dreaming at all, that the baby moose was in fact right there. So in his head, there were many assumptions running around. He was sure that this moose must have probably reached his farm and was actually from the forest nearby. However, there was something that did not seem right to Plucas. He sensed that there was something wrong. When he went closer to inspect that moose, he found out the reason. Just imagine how shocked you would be if you saw a baby moose lying there right in front of your house. It was indeed shocking for Plucas to discover this. After he realized that the baby moose was really there, he looked around and checked to see if the calf was alone or not. To Plucas, the calf's mother was somewhere around, but even after a while, there was no moose to be found. So as soon as Plucas saw that the calf was all alone, he decided to take a closer look. Plucas went closer to the moose and was very cautious as he did not want to scare the little being. When he was near the baby moose, he could see that it was a female moose that may have been just over 2 weeks or so. Since her condition was not great, he could guess how the mother turned out. There was only one assumption that Plucas had at the back of his head. He believed that this female moose's mother was definitely killed by hunters. Since the attack left the baby moose in such a shock, he was sure that that calf was in search of safety. So it soon ended up on the property of the farm to get away from the merciless hunters. The calf was injured as well. The first sight of her was heartbreaking. Plucas explained to the interviewers when he was first asked about the initial moment when he met the calf. Since it had gone through such a traumatic experience, the calf was very frightened and in a very bad shape. So Plucas knew in his heart that in order to save the calf from other predators, he had to step in and help her. She was starved, dirty, sad, and her fur was infested with flies. Plucas further explained as he spoke about how badly the baby moose was when he discovered her in his front gate. He said that the baby calf was hurt physically and it was also mentally shaken because of the hunters. Plucas said that she was trembling with fear when he approached her too. The calf was in such a bad state that she could not even stand up and walk on her own. This made Plucas all the more eager to act right away and try to better her condition. So what did he do? Plucas picked the calf with his arms and placed her inside the house. He was confused as to what he could do next. Plucas was not at all prepared for what was coming next. The only thing for Plucas to do next was to call experts for help, as he was not trained to medicate the calf. So he immediately called animal services after he carried the baby moose inside the house. However, an unfortunate thing happened because they could not offer any help until the next day. The calf was in his hands to be cared for during the first night. So since he was not confident about handling the baby moose, there was something Plucas had to do. His next move was to call his friends up and tell them about the whole story to hopefully get some advice from them. He was unexpectedly scolded by his closest friends that told him he was not capable of taking care of the calf and that he was a fool for taking her in. As we all would have probably done, Plucas decided to call up some of his family members and a few of his best friends seeking some advice and tips. He was unexpectedly received with much aggression from the people he called up. "It is illegal, you should not do it. Let nature take care of it," were some of the things that Plucas was left to hear. He soon realized that there was no one he could turn to for help. So Plucas decided to collect some leaves and poured some milk to check if the moose would be willing to eat. He knew in his heart that this was going to be a very long night, but was not about to give up. He knew that he had to try his best to hopefully save the calf as her condition was worsening by the minute. Animal services ended up being of no help at all, and it was quite a blow for poor Plucas, who needed their help. Not a single facility that helps or assists wild orphan animals can be found in Lithuania. So Plucas obviously had to call the only option there, animal services. He knew that if he left her, the hunter would come and surely take her life. One thing that Plucas knew for sure was that if he gave the calf to the local hunters, there was only one result. It would mean certain death for the poor calf. He again called to ask for help, ringing animal services once again. He had one question for them. Even though his friends had told him that keeping a baby calf was illegal, he wanted to know from animal services if this was true. There was a huge surprise that was waiting for Plucas. He did not expect it, but animal services agreed that he could take the moose in and keep her on his farm. They told him that it was up to him and that it was solely based on his choice. However, they did tell him that if he decided to keep her, it would automatically mean he was responsible for her. It was such an exciting news for Plucas to hear. He decided to keep the female moose and even gave her the name Emma. As you may have already guessed, the first few weeks that he kept her was very challenging for Plucas. You could even compare the feeling to something like fatherhood. Emma needed constant attention and required to be fed after every hour. Plucas did all that he could to nurse Emma back to health. He really was the perfect owner, dad for Emma. And so, it came as no surprise to see that Emma was growing very attached to him. Each time he had to leave Emma, she would cry and beg him not to leave. He would even sleep next to her in the barn or even in the open fields just to make her feel safe. As they were together most of the time, the bond between Emma and Plucas was getting very strong. Emma soon started to trust him, and it was clear that she was starting to feel safe. She was afraid of everything but me, Plucas had even said. Emma was getting better and was now in a place where she felt safe. Plucas had to think of what the next step would be. Emma started to show progress, and in due time, Plucas felt that she needed to get introduced to the forest because that was where she ultimately belonged. Emma was initially very scared of the forest and was apprehensive about entering, but Plucas assisted her and even helped her find food. He wanted her to get closer to nature and get connected with it. Emma grew bigger and became more comfortable in the forest. She would often roam about for hours unattended in the forest nearby. This would then leave Plucas to get a little tensed, worried if she would forget her home. I remember those first nights she didn't come home, Plucas explained. Oh, I barely slept. But she grew up, I had to get over it. After all, it was my goal from the very beginning. Emma had fully grown up and stayed permanently in the forest, but this did not mean that Plucas was forgotten. She still came to see him every day. She would come to play and spend some time with Plucas every day. Plucas would always keep some treats with him to give to Emma. However, there was a huge surprise that Emma was about to give Plucas. Emma was not fond of other humans except Plucas, due to obvious reasons. To me, she is gentle and loving. She is very careful when we are playing, so she would not hurt me, explains Plucas. Even though she had grown up to be a mature moose, there was still a huge problem that was in her way: the local hunters. Plucas has to plan something to keep her safe. Even though seeing Emma roam about in the forest was thrilling, Plucas feared that Emma would turn out like her mother. He did not want to lose her but could not keep her with him. Plucas decided to put the hunter on his side, and so he invited them. I had some hunters over for them to see her as not just a nice, warm steak with potatoes and vegetables on the table, but as a very intelligent and loving animal, Plucas said. Plucas succeeded in his plan after the hunter saw his connection with Emma. The hunters ended up promising to not hunt Emma, and some even claimed they would stop hunting moose altogether. Plucas felt like he achieved something after hearing that some hunter would completely stop their hunting. He was over the moon to hear this, and just then Emma came as a huge surprise. Emma had spent some time in the forest by herself. One day, she came to visit Plucas, and he discovered that she was actually pregnant. It was such a good news to see that she was fitting well with the other moose in the wild. In Plucas's words, "I'm her world now and she is mine. Sometimes I wonder, was it me who saved her, or is it the other way around?" This next story is also equally educative. Lithuanian-born Darius Sasnauskas' backyard is connected to the Yellowstone National Park. Nature was nothing new. One day he saw that there was a family of deer there, with one fawn struggling to catch up to the others. The baby deer had an injured front leg with his belly bleeding too. It was left behind as the others were too quick-paced. Sasnauskas was certain that the little deer would soon get eaten by predators roaming the forest. "I do not support keeping wild animals as pets. But this was a special situation," he captioned his video. He decided to treat her injured leg and brought her home. She seemed to enjoy the house, and his dog and cat were truly intrigued by the strange creature their master had brought home. All the animals got along quite quickly, but the fawn was incredibly hungry. The fawn needed a lot of care and attention like most infants do. Sasnauskas made sure to feed her and made her feel safe in his house because she looked traumatized. His other pets were slowly becoming affectionate to the little fawn too, and everything seemed to fall into place. The first week that the fawn stayed, she was sleeping next to Sasnauskas' bed on a shirt he gave her. The deer was attached to their shirt and could only fall asleep on it. Since he single-handedly saved her life, she was very attached to him and fit right in with her new family. She would constantly follow him and had to be attended all the time because of her fragile state. Sasnauskas was not so sure about raising a deer. I had to do some internet search and reading to be able to understand how to raise a fawn, get up at night to feed her every 4 hours, and clean her after, Darius said. He made a splint for her to hopefully get her to walk properly. There was another thing that happened. She and the rest of other animals struck up a close friendship. Soon, Mac the Bernese mountain dog became close to the fawn and would constantly lick her face. Mac very quickly took charge of the baby deer's foster dad. Mac made sure the fawn ate well, was clean, and even making sure that she did not run too far away. Within just a few days, the baby deer was walking normally and she had indeed recovered. Sasnauskas was glad to see such a bond form between his animals. But he avoided naming her to keep the others from getting too attached. This was because he knew she would have to return to the wild eventually. Her herd would visit every day, so he knew that she would have to join them again someday soon. He could never take the place of the deer's real mother. Sasnauskas would take the deer outside after seeing that she had made a full recovery. Since she belonged to the wild, he wanted her to get closer to nature and eventually join her herd. But, each time he tried to release her, she would find her way back as she felt safer in his care. She obviously was not ready to leave him or Mac behind just yet, as they had been such blessings to her. Sasnauskas took the deer outside once again after 2 weeks of caring for her. He was sure that the deer would get accustomed to the wild, the more he took her to it. As soon as she saw her mother, she made a dash towards her. Since he had failed to let her go each time he tried, he was happy to see her be so excited to go to her herd. Sasnauskas was indeed very happy to witness this. He was glad to see that he had rehabilitated her well enough for her to go back to nature, as wild animals do not belong in a domestic setting. Even though she was attached to him, her instincts kicked in as soon as she spotted her mother. Sasnauskas was overjoyed to see this and did not expect to see her ever again. I really hoped that she did not get attached to me too much, because that would make it very hard for her to survive in the wild, Sasnauskas said when asked about the deer. He made a very good point in saying this, even though some people disagree. Mac and Sasnauskas were no way skilled enough to train her on how to survive the wild. He was sure that she needed her family way more than them. The deer's herd would often visit the same area during the fall, as it was quite safe. Sasnauskas did not imagine that he would ever get to see her again. He knew that she would have all grown up and probably not even recognize him anymore. He was in for a big surprise as the deer came back with her family. She was leaping with joy along with several of her deer mates. When Sasnauskas saw that she had returned, he decided to post a video on his social media. All of his selfless actions saving and nursing the deer to health received a positive feedback from so many. He wrote, "I didn't expect this story to become so popular. I am sure that any of us with a little bit of a conscience about our existence, with love for nature and animals, would do the same." Darius Sasnauskas has given much advice regarding wildlife on his YouTube channel. The first video he posted filmed him giving a bath to the little fawn. He captioned the video, "Until few weeks old, fawn needs help to get cleaned and get help to go to bathroom, and that's what usually Mother Doe does, but in this case, I had to do it." Darius Sasnauskas also spoke about the times he needed to wake up at night to feed the baby deer. He had no choice but to play mother. In one particular video, he woke up at 2 a.m. and had to feed the little deer right beside his bed. Since the bottle he used was so huge, he had to go to the pharmacy to buy another one. He managed to find the perfect size for the little deer. Darius Sasnauskas actually met the deer once again after a year following the rescue. He uploaded a YouTube video captioned, "Baby Deer a Year After the Rescue and Release." The video showed the now 11-month-old deer with her family roaming happily. Sasnauskas said the deer does not remember him and that she gets frightened when H approaches her. Sometimes an entire family of deer needs to get rescued as well. On one cold day in October, Tom Satter was with his family in Taku Inlet, that is over 7 miles away from Juneau, Alaska. He was enjoying the weather with his sister Sharon Kelly, his brother Tim Satter, and Tom's daughter, Anna. While they were minding their own business and going about their day, they suddenly noticed a very strange sight with the use of their binoculars. The family got closer to the scene hoping to see birds or maybe sea lions. They were about to get the shock of their lives as they were in fact deer. When they spotted 4 Sitka black-tailed deer that was approaching their boat, they were truly astonished. Tom Satter even said, they swam right toward the boat, then, they started to circle the boat. They were looking up and looked like they needed help. They obviously needed to be rescued. Tom Satter even said that they were foaming at the mouth and could hardly float. The deer were not adult deer yet. It was going to be a challenge to try and bring them up to the boat. Tom then made a lasso using a rope, fastened it around each of the deer's neck, and the family joined forces to pull them on board. The deer were surprisingly very cooperative. But their problems did not end just there. Each of the deer collapsed due to exhaustion after reaching the boat. Kelly Satter explained that they couldn't stand up on their own. They couldn't shake the water off their coats. She also said the deer didn't want to touch them, but it was clear they were happy to be there. They probably would have crawled on board if they could have. As the boat got closer to land, the deer were gaining their energy after basking the sun. They seemed to be happy that they got rescued. As soon as they reached the dock, one buck jumped onto the dock out of the boat. He then jumped into the water, swam to shore and finally entered the woods. 2 other deer followed suit and had no problem going back. However, the 4th deer was having issues. Tom Satter spoke to interviewers and said, the last one was in real trouble. I think he was the biggest of the 4. He couldn't get the water off him. I massaged him, he was shaking and was very hypothermic, I think. The last one needed assistance and had to be wheelbarrowed to land. However, the deer could not stand up straight and was very wobbly. Riley Woodford, an Alaska Department of Fish and Game worker, may have been chased off by predators and experienced adolescent dispersal, or was looking for food. He claims that deer always seem to be able to ramp up body heat, like in the winter, they'll just ramp up their metabolism. A deer could, however, just become completely exhausted. He says wild animals should not be rescued except for desperate times like this because it could turn out to be a threat to the rescuer as well.